future activities are prevented. And so I think one of the things that we need to look at in the future, as we work with you and others in the industry, is putting really robust penalties in place in case of improper actions. And that's why I asked these questions.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, the whip of the House, Mr. Scalise, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Zuckerberg, I appreciate you coming here. I know, as some of my other colleagues mentioned, you came here voluntarily, and we appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion because clearly what your company's been able to do has revolutionized the way that people can connect, and there's a tremendous benefit to our country. Now it's a worldwide platform, and it's helped create a shortage of computer programmers. So as a former computer programmer, I think we would both agree that we need to encourage more people to go into the computer sciences because our country is a world leader, thanks to your company and so many others. But it obviously raises questions about privacy and data and how the data is shared and what is a user's expectation of where that data goes. So I want to ask a few questions. First, would you agree that we need more computer programmers and people to go into that field?
Congressman, yes.
That's a public service announcement we just made, so appreciate you joining me in that. And Mr. Shimkus' question, it was really a follow-up to a question yesterday that you weren't able to answer, but it was dealing with how Facebook tracks users, especially after they log off. And you had said, in relation to Congressman Shimkus' question, that there is data mining, but it goes on for security purposes. So my question would be, is that data that is mined for security purposes also used to sell as part of the business model?
Congressman, I believe that those are that we collect different data for those, but I can follow up on the details of
All right, if you could follow up, I would appreciate that. Getting into this new realm of content review, I know some of the people that work for Facebook, Campbell Brown said, for example, this is changing our relationship with publishers and emphasizing something that Facebook has never done before. It's having a point of view. And you mentioned the Diamond and Silk example where you I think described it as a mistake. Were the people who made that mistake held accountable in any way?
Congressman, let me follow up with you on that. That situation developed while I was here preparing to testify, so I'm not in all the details of it.
I do want to ask you about a study that was done dealing with the algorithm that Facebook uses to describe what is fed to people through the news feed. And what they found was, after this new algorithm was implemented, that there was a tremendous bias against conservative news and content and a favorable bias towards liberal content. And if you can look at that, that shows a 16-point disparity, which is concerning. I would imagine you're not going to want to share the algorithm itself with us. I'd encourage if you wanted to do that, but who develops the algorithm? I wrote algorithms before, and you can determine whether or not you want to write an algorithm to sort data, to compartmentalize data, but you can also put a bias in if that's the directive. Was there a directive to put a bias in? And first, are you aware of this bias that many people have looked at and analyzed and seen?
Congressman, this is a really important question. There is absolutely no directive in any of the changes that we make to have a bias in anything that we do. To the contrary, our goal is to be a platform for all ideas. And,
I know we're almost out of time, so if you can go back and look and determine if there was a bias. Whoever developed that software, you have 20,000 people that work on some of this data analysis. If you can look and see if there is a bias and let us know if there is and what you're doing about it, because that is disturbing when you see that kind of disparity. Finally, there's been a lot of talk about Cambridge and what they've done in the last campaign. In 2008 and 2012, there was also a lot of this done. One of the lead digital heads of the Obama campaign said recently, Facebook was surprised we were able to suck out the whole social graph, but they didn't stop us once they realized that was what we were doing. They came to office in the days following the election, recruiting, and were very candid that they allowed us to do things they wouldn't have allowed someone else to do because they were on our side. Now, that's a direct quote from one of the heads of the Obama digital team. What would she mean by they, Facebook, were on our side?
Congressman, we didn't allow the Obama campaign to do anything that any developer on the platform wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
So she was making an inaccurate statement in your point of view?
Yes.
All right.
Gentleman's
Appreciate the
time's
comments and
expired.
look forward to those answers. Yield back the balance of my time.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, welcome. Facebook uses some of the most advanced data processing techniques and technologies on the planet, correct?
Congressman, we pride ourselves on doing good technical work.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you use these technologies to flag spam, identify offensive content, and track user activity, right?
Among other things.
But in 2015, when The Guardian first reported on Cambridge Analytica using Facebook user data, was that the first time Facebook learned about these allegations?
Congressman, in 2015, when we heard that the developer on our platform, Alexander Kogan...
Was that the first time you heard about it?
When it was reported
by The Guardian?
Data to Cambridge Analytica?
When The Guardian made the report, was that the first time you heard about it? Thank you. So do you routinely learn about these violations through the press?
Congressman, sometimes we do. I generally think that...
Let me ask you this. You had the capability to audit developers' use of Facebook user data and do more to prevent these abuses. But the problem at Facebook not only persisted, it proliferated. In fact, relatives to other types of problems you had on your platform, it seems as though you turned a blind eye to this, correct?
Congressman, I disagree with that assessment. I do think that going forward, we need to take a more proactive view of policing what the developers do. But looking back, we've had an app review process. We investigate.
But Mr. Zuckerberg, it seems to us that it seems like you were more concerned with attracting and retaining developers on your platform than you were with ensuring the security of Facebook's user data. Let me switch gears. Your company is subject to a 20-year consent decree with the FTC since 2011, correct?
Congressman, we have a consent decree, yes.
And that decree emerged out of a number of practices that Facebook engaged in that the FTC deemed to be unfair and deceptive. One such practice was making Facebook users' private information public without sufficient notice or consent, claiming that Facebook certified the security and integrity of certain apps when in fact it did not, and enabling developers to access excessive information about a user and their friends. Is that correct?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with all of the things that the FTC said, although I'm
these
very
were
familiar
part of
with
the
FTC
consent
order
decree
itself.
So I think I'm just concerned that despite this consent decree, Facebook allowed developers access to an unknown number of user profiles on Facebook for years, potentially hundreds of million, potentially more, and not only allowed but partnered with individuals and app developers such as Alexander Kogan, who turned around and sold that data on the open market and to companies like Cambridge Analytica. Mr. Zuckerberg, you've said that you plan to audit tens of thousands of developers that may have improperly harvested Facebook user data. You also said that you plan to give all Facebook users access to some user controls that will be made available in the EU under the GDPR. But it strikes me that there's a real trust gap here. This developer data issue is just one example. But why should we trust you to follow through on these promises when you have demonstrated repeatedly that you're willing to flout both your own internal policies and government oversight when the need suits you?
Congressman, respectfully, I disagree with that characterization. We've had a review process for apps for years. We've reviewed tens of thousands of apps a year and taken action against a number of them. Our process was not enough to catch a developer.
I see my time is almost over. I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, that to my mind, the only way we're going to close this trust gap is through legislation that creates and empowers a sufficiently resourced expert oversight agency with rulemaking authority to protect the digital privacy and ensure that companies protect our users' data. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection, Mr. Latta of Ohio, for 4 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman, and Mr. Zuckerberg, thanks very much for being with us today. First question I have is, can you tell the Facebook users that the Russians and the Chinese have not used the same methods as other third parties to scrape the entire social network for their gain?
Congressman, we have not seen that activity.
None at all?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay. Let me